so much hate.
There you go.
All right, here we go.
It's working now. I can't hear Tara though.
No, I can't. We're good. I mean, it's recording now,
Yeah.
so I guess we'll just wait for her to log in, and then this will be the beginning of the podcast because she doesn't do any editing. So
Can you hear Tara? Or why do I keep on calling? I'm keep on messing up her name.
it's recording.
Yeah, I know, but I couldn't hear anybody.
There you go. I can hear you now.
Swear to God, I'm gonna break something.
Yes. Burn stuff.
I feel like this is typical.
Mm-hmm. It's every time I record music, every time something just doesn't want to work, and yeah, spend an hour trying to get everything running.
Oh my God. All right, there's Mike. Okay. Hi, David.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us from the North Woods.
Well, thank you for having me.
Mike, thank you for joining us from your castle in Transylvania.
No, we're both in the same place. I'm just in the northeast wing of our desert estate.
Don't ruin the mystique.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so the technical problems aside,
Right.
seriously, thank you for hanging out with us.
Oh, it's cool.
Dave, it's been a while. I don't think we've chatted for quite a while.
It's been a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun. No, thank you for doing this. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I figured since the Burning Circle is coming out, and a couple people had asked me to talk about Burning Circle because we haven't really ever talked much about that period. We've talked
Right.
about cold a lot. And of course, Mike has talked a lot in the past about like Ionia and
Mhm.
Dark Corner and stuff, but we've never really talked about Burning Circle.
Nope. There's a lot.
So, and it's funny because so much stuff happened during that era,
Mhm.
and it's just kind of those people who were there know, but besides that, it's kind of like nobody really knows. So, all right, so here we are to talk about the Burning Circle and then Dust.
Yes.
Is Mike still here?
Mhm.
I'm here. I'm just waiting for you to dictate
Shut up.
how you want to start this discussion. I know you have some
Okay.
questions, but you know, I'm going to let you run the show here, and just feel free to ask whatever you want.
All righty.
There.
So I was gonna start by saying I find it really cool that Avant-Garde is putting the record. They announced the release of the record on our anniversary, and it's fitting because this is the first time we worked together. This is the first time we met was when I came out to record my vocals for this album. So I thought that was really fitting, and it was completely accidental that happened. So I just wanted to shout that out because I thought it was cool.
Yeah, it was strange how that just meshed up like it did.
Yeah, it was almost like a cool anniversary gift or something.
Yeah.
So I'll start just from my memory of it, and then I'll go to a question. Because we got quite a few questions. I just remember coming out. First of all, I was flying on an airplane for the first time, which was terrifying, but exciting. And then just the craziness of meeting Mike for the first time. And then I remember going over to Dave's house and just being like, oh my God, it's Mike and Dave. And then recording vocals was like crazy because prior to that, the only vocals I recorded, I went into a studio once, but it was mostly just in my bedroom on a really rigged together system. I don't even know how we recorded, to be honest with you. But so going into the studio was like wild and scary and nerve-wracking. And I can just remember making you guys put vocal effects in the headphone because I was too insecure to sing without vocal effects on my voice. And then you telling me after the fact that there actually wasn't vocal effects on in your what you guys could hear. And that's pretty mortifying.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, but like, yeah, back then, I think there was a couple things that I didn't want to put effects on when we recorded because you always want to add certain things afterwards, you know.
Sure.
One of them was like reverb and delay and stuff like that for vocals. But I understand, yeah. In fact, when I record, I have to have effects on my voice because I just like it sounds terrible if it's just flat and
It's
dry.
cringe. I
Mhm.
don't do that at all. I've never done that since then. It was just being scared of hearing how awful you sound in with a dry voice. But like I've
Mhm.
never done that since, but I just think that's hilarious that I was like, can you put vocal effects on the headphones? Like that fixes your fuck ups or anything.
Right. Well, it puts you in you have an idea of what it's going to sound like in the final.
That's true.
You know, and I find that I sing differently too. If you can hear
For
reverb,
sure.
echo, you know. So
Yeah. And I also remember I was just telling Mike about this the other day is my speaking parts on my song. Like when I listen to it now, I'm like, why were you rushing through it? Like you could tell I was nervous because I would have slowed it down if I would have not been so nervous. So that kind of cracks me up. But
yeah, that
anyway, I won't
happens.
ask you all what your opinion was.
It's garbage. Come
Why is she here?
on. No,
I
it
just
came out really
remember it
well.
being, I just remember it being at the very, very end of the sessions. And
Mhm.
by that time, you know, Dave and I had been recording well over a year because I mean it was Bleak Vein and then into the Burning Circle. By that time, we were very, very efficient and focused in the studio at that point. So um, you came in, I knew you were nervous, but you know, all you needed to do is just get the lines down, and we would be able to get it in there and sound good. And you did, and it sounded good.
Yeah, I don't remember. I feel like I only did one take. I don't remember doing a bunch of takes of those. Maybe one or two.
I can't recall. I just remember being in Dave's studio and good memories because I mean we were there like about a year and just recording all the time and it just for me Lycia definitely moved to this next level in that year of recording because from that point on everything was elevated to a higher level.
Um, you remember, Tara? Did I put you in that little tiny closet, that like
Yeah,
tool room? Yeah.
yeah. Like in the garage and it was hot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
totally. Which is probably good too because I couldn't see you guys staring at me.
No, I mean, I don't remember taking multiple takes. I think you like pulled it off really like within like probably one or two.
I think so because I feel like I would have gotten embarrassed if I would have had to had to have done it a bunch of times. So I
Mhm.
must have did pretty good because I don't remember being embarrassed. So
No.
that would have definitely stuck with me.
Yeah.
So my first question is from Booney, who legit has been asking for Burning Circle on vinyl for probably 10 years at least. And I've been wanting to tell him that this was coming since I knew that it was coming because I knew how excited he was going to be about it. But the first question is, I'd love a general rundown of the production, recording gear, outboard effects, mics, etc.
Well, I'll let Dave handle most of this, but I'll tell you what I brought into it because to a certain degree, I'm thinking this was probably 80% Dave's studio gear and 20% mine. I brought over, besides my instruments at the time, which was the Ibanez Rose Star, the Applause Acoustic Electric, my Kawai PH50, and my Alesis drum machine. I brought over also my Digitech GSP-5, and I think the superstar for me, at least in terms of effects, was that Lexicon LXP5. I put it on my on pretty much all the guitars. It really made it very massive. But this was very much recorded in Dave's studio with all his effects and his board and his recorder. So I'll just turn this over to Dave from here on out.
So the recorder we were using was a Tascam 688, which is essentially like an all-in-one unit. It's like a 10 input mixer, 8 tracks on cassette tape. And we recorded vocals and guitars and bass on 7 tracks. And then on the 8th track, I put down a sync tone and then ran that sync tone to a box that would convert it to MIDI timecode, MIDI machine control. That would go to a Macintosh 2 LC or LC2, sorry, running Performer sequencer. And then I would actually, what I do is I would send that back out to Mike's drum machine. And then we had an ASR 10, we had a DX7, had the Kawai keyboard. So all that stuff was sequenced prior or during while we were recording. And the drums were already done. Mike already had the drums programmed, and he had his keyboard parts that have him just play through, and we'd actually sequence them. So it gave us more analog tracks to record guitars and vocals, and then all the electronics were sequenced. So that will all be mixed in live when we were mixing down the 2-track. I think besides Mike's effects, I used the ASR 10's effects also, because you could turn that into an effects unit essentially by running a live line through it. And then I also had an Alesis Quadriverb, which was really crappy effects, but we used it anyways for whatever we could. I think I used it for like, I don't know, probably any kind of synth like reverb and delay and things like that. And then so everything was go through the Tascam. It's mixed through the Tascam. We would have to mix it live. Mike and I would both be running like the faders, and that was mixed down to DAT, and then the DAT went to Sam for him to master.
Cool.
So,
And don't undersell those Alesis effects, because they sounded great. And I had I think a microverb that we took on the Burning Circle tour that I used on the drum machine. I very clearly remember we were playing a show, I believe in North Carolina. We were playing at this larger venue, and the sound guy, who was a rock and roll sound guy, I remember I was standing by him when we were running the drum machine and the microverb, and he's like, "That's the largest drum sound I've ever heard in my life." And so we can't discount those Alesis effects, because they were massive.
oh yeah.
And they really added a different element. The Lexicon reverbs were more refined and lush, but those Alesis reverbs really packed a punch, especially on the drums, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Right. It was.
Speaking of the Burning Circle tour, since I don't think anybody has asked any questions about it on here, so I want to get some of that in there before we jump back into these questions. I know my perception of that tour, and I remember loving it. However, being cramped into Mike's Geostorm and all of that, but like of course, being a young person, not afraid of anything at the time, and just like ready to just jump and go wherever we were told to go. I just remember how much fun it was, and you know, me getting on a stage for the very first time, which was crazy, and hanging out with Trance to the Sun, and like meeting so many people who I had been pen friends with through the years, finally getting to meet so many people in person. But there was also a lot of drama, kind of, because of, Dave, I don't think you wanted to tour at all. I don't know. But like being crammed in a tiny car, and like the car breaking down at one point, and just like all of the whatever. So like what is your perception? And then I guess Mike, you share, or vice versa, share your perceptions of that tour also.
If Mike
All
wants.
right, Dave, you can go first.
Oh, no, I mean, I think whenever, because we still, I think we're all fairly new friends, even at the time, even with me knowing Mike for, I think, only for
For
about
sure.
a year before or something like that. Yeah, whenever you cram people into a small, very uncomfortable situation for a long period of time, they want to end up stabbing each other. Um, but
Actually, we probably got along a lot better than we could have.
yeah, I agree. True. I think my biggest frustration was I think I had a really bad stage fright, really
Mm.
bad stage fright, and I didn't want to tell anybody, so I never really shared that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I was horrible. I had horrible anxiety, like stomach cramps, and I think it just over the period of time, I just became more and more unpleasant because it was just sort of digging inside of me a little bit, quite a bit.
Mm,
Um, I don't, I still wish we had more musicians to like sort of support us, which would have been
definitely.
amazing. But I think probably in the end it would have been impossible just financially, I think,
For
and
sure.
you know, just to find people that had that kind of time. So
That could basically go out for McDonald's hamburger and that was their payment. Yeah, for
right,
sure.
right.
Okay, well, first of all, I have to share the story about the car breaking down because it was pretty wild. Um, First of all, it broke down and I glided off the freeway to the only gas station. We were out in the middle of nowhere that actually had a shop,
Mm-hmm.
a Sunday. And the guy came out and I was like, my car's broke down. He's like, okay, we can fix it. Like, okay, can you fix it now? Well, it's Sunday, so it's got to wait till tomorrow. And what was the only other building around? A motel right next door.
Yeah.
So the thing I remember most about that is there are several things. One is that I walked a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, I don't know what, to the town. It was Live Oak, Florida. And as I found out later, the road I walked along had swamps on both sides, and there was alligators there. I walked,
And water moccasins.
I
Oh my
remember
God.
at times walking on the side of the road to keep the cars from hitting me, and they all beeped at me, probably as like a warning of danger. Walking ankle deep in water. I wasn't eaten by alligators, so I guess that's good.
Thank God.
But I also remember that was the first of 3 days for me without sleep because
Mm.
after that we got down to we got a rental car in Live Oak. I walked to Live Oak, Florida to get a rental van. We loaded a lot of stuff while they were working on the car. We drove down to Fort Lauderdale to Jason Wallach of the Unquiet Voids house, where we stayed. Not only did we play a show down there, but we also went to his wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And we also recorded a compilation song with him, the We Three Kings song for
Mm-hmm.
the Project Christmas album. So when we finished that, we went to Tampa and played a show. I still hadn't
Mm-hmm.
had any sleep. After the Tampa show, we drove all the way to back to Live Oak, picked up the car, and then I drove to Atlanta. By that time, I had completely broken down. I'd lost my voice, and it was a completely surreal evening. And there's so much more to discuss, and I'm not going to go there. But it was just a weird time. But
Yeah.
um, and now I've diverted so far. I can't remember what the original thing about what we were talking about.
Just tour memories from the Burning Circle.
Okay, yeah, okay. Now my memories of this is that for me, that was Lycia's best tour because I I came up in the 80s. I played in bands where there was a drummer, there was a bass player, I played guitar, and there was a vocalist, and everything that we did was real.
Mm-hmm.
When Dave and I went on the Start Corner tour, we played with a DAT tape. And I always felt like the DAT tape was to a certain degree like a straitjacket. It restricted you.
Mm-hmm.
You were stuck with it. But for me, more than ever, when me and Tara, when me and you went out on the Cold tour, that DAT tape, it was frustrating to me because
Mm-hmm.
not only I felt like I couldn't concentrate on playing because I was nonstop fixated with the DAT tape and making sure that we were on the right song, and it didn't feel like playing live. Whereas the
Yeah.
Burning Circle, now the Burning Circle tour was just me playing guitar. Dave, you played bass. Terry, you played keyboards. We had the drum machine, and I sang. It was real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could switch up on the fly. If we wanted to skip a song, we skip a
Yeah.
song.
Yeah.
And it felt real to me. And while there were definitely limitations, because this came at a time where we relied on house sound men, and none of these people understood jack squat about reverb on vocals. I can't tell you how every single night I got in an argument with the house sound man about the reverb. They're always like, that's too much reverb. You don't use reverb like that. And I'm like, dude, we do. This is what we do.
Right.
And it was frustrating, but nevertheless, we played every night. It was real. And for me, that was Lycia's best tour because we weren't relied on backing tracks. I absolutely detest backing tracks. One of the reasons why Lycia doesn't go and play shows now is I don't want to rely on backing tracks. And
Yeah.
Lycia is so layered that we're not in a financial place where we could bring in 5, 6, 7 musicians to do everything that we layer. But I am not going to do backing tracks. I'd rather just go out and strip it down to acoustic. But with the
Yeah.
Burning Circle, somehow we pulled it off. And, I feel really bad because we brought a couple musicians in, Josh and Jason, and both great musicians, both great guys. But for whatever reason, it didn't mesh.
Yeah.
And I feel bad because they're both great guys. But somehow, after that didn't work out, the three of us found a way to make it work to the point where we did a full East Coast and West Coast tour that went over pretty well.
Yeah.
And while there was tension there, I mean, what band doesn't have tension?
Right. At least we didn't get in any fist fights.
Yeah, I mean, there was tension there, but I mean, anyone that knows the size of a Geostorm, the fact that at that time I smoked like a chimney and you guys were probably choking the whole time, it just was it was what it was. But we somehow pulled it off. And while there was lots of craziness from that Live Oak story or coming out of our car in Detroit, Michigan, and having the car completely 100% covered with mayflies. I was picking mayflies out of the equipment for like 5 years afterwards.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yep.
And it was everything that a band needs to experience on tour. It's like paying your dues.
Yeah.
It's only a shame that somehow we couldn't have all three of us stayed on the same page, because if we could have, then we would have all looked back at the tour as us paying our dues and then step to the next level. But
Right.
things happen as they do. I mean,
Yeah.
we were for myself personally, a few years later, I was pretty much derailed by some health issues. So it was all moot anyways. But I have mostly pretty strong memories of the Burning Circle tour because being a post-punk musician from the 80s, that was the most real tour that Lycia ever did.
Yeah. It was good. Some of my absolute fondest memories are from that era because it was like we were out there doing it and met so many great people and so many quirky, weird things happened. But it was
thinking
good.
about how things are now with bands. We were doing what bands are doing now, but in 1995.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
true.
And we were doing it with sound men that were arguing with us every single night.
Yeah.
And somehow we still somehow feedback and all, we still just soldiered on and we did it, you know.
Right. I think in retrospect now, I mean, man, if I could go back in time or even just do it all over again, I would totally jump on it now. I'd be far more excited, now knowing what I know, understanding
Yeah.
what to expect. Um,
Yeah.
like I would say yes to, doing a complete tour again, because, now I think I would just enjoy it now rather, you know, you sort of focus on all the little irritating parts and so now this being older and having more experience, doing another tour, I'd be just like, yeah, this is gonna be amazing. It'd be something to look forward to. It'd be exciting, but probably impossible, unfortunately.
I think it would be
Definitely.
impossible to do it in that capacity.
Mhm.
Lycia is I think there's this perception that Lycia has this Lycia sound, but the variety of stuff that we've done, it goes from, the noise of Bleak to the, acoustic to shoegaze influenced stuff to, I mean, we're all over the place.
Mhm.
And to be able to go out and do a whole career retrospective show, it would require a lot of extra musicians that could really switch back and forth between a lot of instruments. And we all, we're all we're where we are in our life now, and we have our jobs and we have where we are.
Mhm.
How could that ever work? I don't see how it could work, but
Right.
you know, maybe in some kind of stripped down acoustic way, maybe. I mean, I've been messing around doing acoustic stuff with reverb and I put out a word for a sound person last year and got some pretty interesting uh, responses, but just getting everybody on the same page in the same place. Geography is a great derailer as far as I'm concerned, because I don't have the time to take off from work and go someplace and practice. So you just make it work. And plus two, we're all getting older, and sometimes you just ask yourself, maybe I should just be satisfied with what we've done.
Mm.
Mhm.
All right. So next question from Derek Power. I'm definitely curious about how it became a 2 CD, then one, and now back to a 2 CD.
Okay.
Mike, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, this is 100% on me. So I'll answer this. First of all, you have to go back to the time frame that I made it into a single CD. It was a difficult time for me. It was early 2000s. Lycia had pretty much fallen off the radar by that point, and I had about 5, 6 years of really challenging health issues. And when I sort of when the, no pun intended, the dust settled, um,
Wah,
you
wah.
know, my confidence level was shattered.
Mhm.
I had lost 100% faith in myself as a guitar player, a vocalist, as a studio technician, everything across the board, as a writer. And I was just trying to, maybe finish up Lycia's career. And by I became sort of obsessed with trying to fix past mistakes, and what I ended up doing was making the mistakes worse. Um, Dave, you can remember when we first started the Burning Circle.
Mhm.
It was supposed to be a single disc originally. Disc one was what the album was going to be, but we were writing so much material then. I mean, we did Bleak. We had the 16 songs of disc one. I was working on another project with John Fair called Dust, where me and him did 10 songs. And then we had all these comp songs, 9 Hours Later, Facade Fades. We were just working on tons of stuff. And if it would have went down the way I wanted to originally in 1995, there would have been 4 Lycia releases. because we all know that Bleak Vein was really just a veiled Lycia release. I
Right,
mean,
right.
Dave, I don't know if you remember, we used to sit around joking around about, if people remember from that era, there were those things that you stared, those posters you stared at, and it was just like abstract dots. And if you looked at it long enough, suddenly something came out.
Yes.
I remember we used to talk about like putting on the inside of Bleak, having something like that. And if someone looked long enough, it would say Lycia across there.
Oh, that would have been
Um,
cool.
So it was just my way of trying to manipulate to get all these releases out. And Project basically nixed the Dust released, and then I said, well, we got this extra material. And I think because Sam really liked 9 Hours Later, he eventually pitched like, why don't we just make Burning Circle a double disc? And the 9 Hours Later is really the key to it all, to this question, because by the time we got around to doing the reissues on Silver, I was really feeling pretty deflated. And I'm a type of person that always wants to make sure everyone is happy, and I don't want to disappoint anybody. And Silver was a very, very much a smaller label, and I didn't want to put any kind of financial crunch on them. And I thought, if I do a double CD, that could potentially be more than maybe what they could afford. And plus, too, I was trying to fix things, and I sort of thought maybe I should just take Burning Circle back to its original premise of the original 16 songs. But then 9 Hours Later came in. I'm like, well, I can't do the Burning Circles without 9 Hours Later. Well, then I'm like, okay, well, what's the other song from disc 2 that is important to me? Resigned. For me, Resigned during the 90s was, if anyone asked me, what is the Lycia song that best represents what Lycia is? To me, it was Resigned, which is ironic because there's no guitar in it, but that slow motion tempo, the mood, it was everything that I wanted Lycia to be. So I'm like, okay, well, Resign needs to be included too. Well, Resign's included. Well, then it's associated songs of Nimble and Surrender need to be included. Well, okay, I can't fit that on a disc. What needs to be excluded? Better Things to Come, a song that I thought was maybe a little too cheery. And Fire and Flames, which was, at the time, I liked that song, but at the time it just felt like a throwaway song. So it's a decision I regret. There's a few decisions, I regret, and this is one of them. It was at a time where I was trying to fix past mistakes. You can't fix past mistakes. You just live with them and you move on. And I thought, maybe I'd release this album as the Burning Circle, and maybe the other songs get released as its own album. But in the end, I was just a confused guy, and I just was making a lot of erratic decisions, including, as much as I appreciate everything that Brian John Mitchell did for us at Silver, and I love the fact that my solo album came out on that label, and it's still one of my favorite albums. Those 3 Lycia reissues were a mistake, because not only did I remaster them myself, and I definitely got caught up in the loudness wars and was out. I mean, I think they sound all right, but you need to leave mastering to the professionals. And I think I was trying to fix everything by controlling everything. And the single disc Lycia, the Burning Circle and the Dust, was a mistake. I should never have done it. And that's why when Avantgarde approached me about maybe doing this, I was like, it's definitely got to be the double. We need to restore the keep the audio exactly as it was, just remaster it. And in terms of the cover, I just thought, let them do what they want. Here's the source photos, and go with it.
It looks beautiful. So here's a related question from Hani. This could have been 2 separate albums. Why did it end up being a single enormous one, which you kind of already just answered?
Yep.
And also, what's the adopted process in deciding the order of tracks on your albums in general?
I don't really know. I think for Burning Circle, I think Dave, we just sat around and said, I think we just sort of figured it out on the fly. No different than what Tara, me and you have done for later albums, like for Estrella.
I
We just
actually, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, talk.
Because I don't actually recall, but if you have insight, go with it, dude.
I actually just discovered a bunch of papers with you like figuring out the song order, and you're like
Oh
writing
my.
each song down with the times, and you're like scratching things out, and you have arrows going everywhere. But yeah, I'm gonna have to pull those out, and I'll take pictures of them and post.
Yeah, do. That
So
would be cool to see. Wow, I can't believe you still have that.
yeah,
I
the
know
whole.
for later albums, I think about like Estrella, it was all mathematical for me.
Hmm.
I thought, okay, the mic songs need to be at this certain point, the instrumentals need to be here, it needs to be balanced. Um, since you were the primary singer on Estrella, Tara. It became much more mathematical. But I know for the earlier albums, Sam at Project had a lot to say about the song order in Ionia. Start Corner, Sam and I worked it out together. And for Vain and Burning Circle and Cold, Dave and I worked it out together.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever actually had added any input to that whatsoever. I just am like, you do what you do.
I
don't care.
think in the end, I pretty much had the final say with every album but
Yeah.
Ionia. Sam pretty much
Yeah.
determined that song order. But I was always open to people's opinions. But I'm sort of a control freak, as you both know.
Well, and I'm
I
always just
do what
kind
I
of
do.
like, this is Mike's baby, and I just am along for the ride. So whatever.
Um, Circling back to the double album question, it was interesting because I remember having a conversation with Mike, and Mike had an idea, almost a concept for an actual double album, because I think he already had it planned that like it was going to happen like a couple of albums later. But he had some basic ideas or concepts of what he wanted to do as far as a double album, because I guess we might have had a conversation about the Burning Circle ending up a double album, and that's something that Mike was a little bit hesitant. At first,
Yeah.
he did mention that he wasn't quite sure about that, and then I think eventually we decided that would be a double.
That's cool.
Mhm.
So Joe Harris has a question. I would like to know how this album became so much longer than the rest, which we already sort of covered, because I love it. Also, the general feel / difference when recording this compared to Cold.
Hmm. I don't. I'm just going to be brief on this, and I'll let you guys give your perception. But to me, Burning Circle was definitely it was the oddball in regards to the progression. Because if you think about it, if you went from Ionia to Start Corner to Vain to Cold, it that same very strong electronic field. But Burning Circle was different. For me, the foundation was A Day in the Start Corner, where there were these songs, Body Electric, and in particular the end of And Through the Smoke and Nails, where I was bringing these chaotic elements, but by the same token, I was doing Goddess of Green Fields and Everything is Cold with the acoustic guitar. And so I wanted to continue expanding on both those concepts. And so it's sort of the former led off to going into Vain, and then I really went full force into the acoustic for Burning Circle. But that disc one of the Burning Circle is really sort of the oddball. If you look at the Lycia, what people might think of as the peak or the main era from the 90s would be Ionia to Estrella. What's the one oddball? It's disc one of the Burning Circle. It's different, and it was met with a lot of strange reactions when it first came out. But maybe there's more questions down the line about why
There is.
So we'll leave it for that. So if you have any perceptions, Dave, just go for it.
I think, well, I mean, the obvious difference between either Cold and the Burning Circle is obviously the location, and the atmosphere. The overall atmosphere is so different. But the Burning Circle, man, like it's still like when when I listen to it, it really does take me right back to a totally different time period, and it's this really wonderful, the mid 90s of us touring and doing these shows and doing the California shows. I think
Hmm.
you really feel that, I think, in some of the music. Hey Mike, I'm curious, did you actually record demos of most of the songs from the first disc before you came over to my house to re-perform them when we recorded it?
Yes, I did. I have demos for every single song on disc one, and they're very much in the same format that I later visited on Tripping Back into the Broken Days,
Mhm.
with the exception of this drum machine. So I have demos that have acoustic guitar, the electric guitar, the drum machine, and my vocals.
Nice.
And I had demoed every one of those songs during a period of time, um, probably maybe 3 or 4 months prior to the Start Corner tour,
Mhm.
and up to just before we started recording. I had demoed every single one, and I probably could have pushed those for the release, but after we worked on the Start Corner tour, I became very excited about expanding that to a much bigger, almost. I was very influenced by shoegaze at the time, and
Mm.
so I didn't want it to be stripped down to just the acoustic guitar with some EBO electric guitar and the drum machine. I really wanted it to be this just massive wall of guitar sounds. And Dave, you probably remember on the Burning Circle disc one, most songs had probably 4 guitar tracks. The acoustic guitar, the EBO guitar, and usually a couple um, electric guitar parts where I was doing riffs.
Yep.
Probably made it very challenging for you to mix.
I I really, really wish that I could remix it again, but because we've lost all the keyboard and drum part, well, the drum parts would be easy to reprogram, but the keyboard parts, it's like, and some of the things that we were doing, like, and like you said, you're just layering so much stuff, but I have no idea, like, as far as like, and the sounds you were using your Kawai, where you're using I was adding some of the Proteus sounds,
Mhm.
layering other ASR 10 stuff, sampled strings or whatever, and I don't know. But I mean, it could be possible to like reassemble it all, um, if the tapes are actually in good condition. But it was cool. I think because you would come over and we would work on like maybe 3 songs at a time. I think we'd sit there and we'd record the acoustic guitar for like 3 songs, and then be like, okay, let's go back. And then you would do EBO or electric guitars, and we'd do all the guitar parts for like 3 songs. I would somehow record your drum parts so I could start working on my bass lines. And then I would give you what I had done, and then you would sort of see if it worked out with your vocals or not. It was a really interesting like assembly, the way that we assembled the whole CD. Actually, it was sort of little chunks at a time.
I wish
I
I could
think
hear those demos.
Me too.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, all my equipment is pretty much fried at this point. I mean, it's old. But you know, we all need to go back to what I just was saying before. I think in the 2000s, I became sort of preoccupied, maybe even obsessed with trying to fix past mistakes, and all I did was muck it up. It's best just to let things be what they be, because I know
Yeah.
what I would think. I mean, there are certain artists that I admired a lot when I was a young boy that are always fiddling and changing things, and I've lost every bit of respect for them. You know, people like what they like, and even if maybe you didn't do it the way that you visualized in your head to do it,
Hmm.
it's
It
out,
is what it is.
and people they hear it and it means something to them, and if you mess with it, you're sort of messing with something that's important to them.
Yeah.
Once it's done, it's beyond you.
Mhm.
You've lost ownership of it, and just let
That's
it be
true.
and focusing on what you're going to do next. And I think one of the things that I think about, because, you know, I think about doing these acoustic things that I've been posting online. It's a way for me to reinterpret stuff without messing with the original because it's live. And so if I want to find any kind of um, you know, a way to make up for my past mistakes and feel good about it, you know, I can just maybe redo the song and record it live, but you're not negating the original. You know, I'm messing around right now with acoustic versions of songs like Bear and Granada, completely different than the original.
Mm-hmm.
And it's awesome. It's fun. Whether anybody ever hears it, I have to like say, what do I need for myself to keep myself sane? And sometimes I think just maybe playing guitar at home for myself and not being ego driven to think that because every time I do something, someone has to hear it. I mean, sort of bizarre if you think about it.
Speaking of sort of along the same lines, um, I actually had considered like remixing my first album, and because I had ideas of trying to improve it, and you know what I could do to change all the things that you hear that you want to change, just because you're the one that wrote the song and recorded it. And I got a lot of people that said, no, keep it the way it is. Just
Mm-hmm.
maybe master it again.
Yeah.
But also, interestingly enough, though, I think I like the idea of reinterpreting songs. Sort of, I know
Yes.
Roger Waters is getting a lot of crap for doing Dark Side of the Moon, but it's a really interesting take and a really interesting interpretation of that album, since he wrote most of it. I think he has sort of the right to sort of sort of assemble those songs in his whatever vision he has at the moment.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, you feel, a song means something to the writer different than the people that hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying there is what dominated me in the 2000s. I barely got anything done in the 2000s because I was so preoccupied with trying to fix past mistakes that were only there for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, I often think about the stuff that I was frustrated with. I wasn't frustrated because it was bad. I was frustrated because it wasn't what I envisioned it to be.
Right.
But because you get fixated with that, suddenly it becomes bad in your mind, and suddenly you're
Yeah.
feeling insecure about yourself and saying, "Oh my God, I failed." But in reality, it wasn't bad. It just was different. And
Yeah.
and I think that's one thing that I've done in the second part of the career is that I've said, okay, look, before I sign off on anything, I'm going to make sure it's what I want it to be. And I
Yeah.
feel very, very comfortable about the second half of the career. Now, the first half of the career, I did have issues with, but is it bad? I don't think it's bad. I just think that I failed to corral probably what I needed to. But then again, if I did what I wanted, how much different would it have been than what came out? I think it would have been so minuscule that
Mm-hmm.
people wouldn't know. And then I asked myself, why am I preoccupying myself with something that most people wouldn't notice?
That's right. Yeah. All right. I'm going to move to our next question. This is from Jeff Todd. What influences were you all into at the time? Not just other music, but general moods, feelings, etc. The music is so epic, from hopeful to melancholy to joy to complete heartache, if that makes sense. It's such an amazing album. So, Dave, do you want to go first?
You both go first, and I'll come in at the end.
You can go,
All right,
Tara.
Dave, you go, and then I'll go.
Okay, all right. I think back then I was listening to people are gonna find this really boring, but I was listening to sort of the same things I listen to now, but like Joy Division,
Same.
Swans,
Yeah. Swans.
I was into like My Bloody Valentine and Slowdive.
Yeah.
What else? Oh man, a bunch of stuff.
Probably the same stuff I was listening to, like Godflesh, Swans. I was huge into Daisy Chainsaw at the time. Um, that sort of like neo folk stuff, which I know you're not even supposed to like now because of weird associations, but that's, Death in June, Current 93, the post punk stuff, Bauhaus, all that stuff. And I kind of still just listen to the same stuff that I did then, add in a few new bands and a few new to me old bands. Um, as far as mood and stuff goes, God, I think I was only like 20 or 21 or something, 21 probably, when I wrote my lyrics for The Burning Circle. And as corny as this sounds, I wrote there's this beautiful cemetery that was not far from my house, and it was like really park like. There was lake there and like just really beautiful. And I can remember going there, and that's where I wrote my lyrics. And of course, I was all starry eyed over mic, and because, and so that was like a huge influence on those lyrics. And also, I mean, I joke that every single song I write is about love and death, but that's actually very accurate that every single song I write is about love and death in some varying degrees. So that's kind of the overall mood of me at that time, just being super young and like starry eyed and also sad at the same time, because that's who we are as people. But yeah, those were my influences.
For me, I started playing music in bands back in 1981, and I was very much from the generation of the initial post-punk bands, very heavily influenced by English post-punk music. And everything that I did through the 80s was influenced by that. At the very end of the 90s, when I got Lycia going, I became influenced by ambient music, and Lycia became this merge for me when I was working on Ionia primarily, merging my post-punk influences with ambient, and somehow, some way, it was perceived as being gothic. And which anybody that knew me in the 80s and knew me at that time would think that's a strange classification for this guy, because this is, I listen to, ambient. I was listening to Tangerine. I mean, Ionia's Tangerine Dream meets Joy Division, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But it's moody. It was moody. And then with Stark Corner, it expanded that. And then, of course, the live album and Bleak built on that. And so I really wanted to reconnect with my guitar roots. It was important to me because I didn't want people to think that I was a synth player. Because I was a guitar player, and maybe my guitar sounded like a synth, but I was a guitar player, and I was very influenced by post-punk guitar players, whether it was Killing Joke, Bauhaus, Echo and the Bunnymen, Psychedelic Furs, Susie and the Banshees. That was my influence as a guitar player. But what ended up happening is the time I approached Burning Circle as being maybe a return to my wake style roots, but at the same time I became very heavily exposed and influenced by the shoegaze movement. And I loved the fact that there were bands that were making just massive walls of sound with guitars. And while the shoegaze crowd never accepted Lycia and never acknowledged Burning Circle, I always saw Disc One as sort of like maybe a slightly harsh shoegaze album. And that's what I wanted with that. And it was sort of frustrating for me because when it came out, with the exception of a handful of people, the shoegaze crowd pretty much dismissed us as being something that we weren't, and maybe saw us as being less than what they were.
Hmm.
And it was frustrating to me. And in a sense, that's what also maybe influenced me to go back to my Lycia roots and to make Cole maybe more electronic.
That's interesting.
And,
Cool.
and Dave, I think Dave, you can understand what I'm saying there,
Mhm.
because we were a bit on the outs. I mean, if you remember.
Yeah, we were. And in the scene, in the Tempe scene, totally on the out. And I was explaining this to a coworker too, because the Gym Blossoms was playing on the radio. I'm like, they get all the attention, but there was lots of bands in the Tempe scene in the 90s, tons of bands that never got any attention, that never got any sort of recognition, you know. And what's even worse is here we are 30 years later, and still very, very little bit of recognition from Tempe from Arizona, any
Mhm.
kind of like, I don't know, publication at all.
Yeah.
You're right about that. It's frustrating to me because everything that I did in the 80s, all the different bands I played in the 80s were completely ignored by the local weekly newspaper. And when we had the second run, I actually sent promo copies to this weekly newspaper.
Mhm.
And not only did they not acknowledge or review it, they never even responded to me. They never acknowledged. It's as if we never existed. And yet they review everybody local. I
Weird.
feel what?
It's weird. It's like there's a vendetta or something.
There was zero interest in us, and we've experienced some stuff. I've heard some statements that really were very dismissive of what we've done here in Arizona. But I have to say, something that really made me feel good was out of the blue, maybe about 6 months ago, I get an email from a woman that is works at the Tempe Library saying, I'd really love for you guys to come down and play this concert series that we do at the library. Is there any way that could be possible? And I thought, wow, you know, I've been playing in the Tempe music scene since 1981 and have been dismissed as being not good enough for the entire time. From my early bands being made fun of to Lycia being dismissed to ignored. So it felt good for someone to say, yeah, come down and maybe play. But it's been bizarre. I mean, Tara can remember well. She was out here in Tempe when we recorded the Burning Circle. When we finished the Burning Circle, me and Tara drove across the country to Ohio. Oh, we were dismissed here, and I could go really into this, but I don't want to go too much into it. But there was definitely a lack of respect for what we were doing in Tempe, even amongst maybe some of our peers. But the first day I was in Ohio, me and Tara were driving around, and we were in Canton, Ohio. One of the first things I saw was a car with a Lycia sticker, and I thought, okay, maybe Tempe is not the place for Lycia.
I
And
was gonna bring that up because that is so wild to me to even think about today. That as soon as we drove over that bridge into Kent, the car in front of us had a Lycia sticker on it. That's wild.
maybe it's because our mindset was more Midwest, East Coast, post-punk,
Possible.
whatever. I mean, uh, I don't know. I don't know why Lycia was never accepted in Arizona, which is bizarre because Steve Roach is from Arizona, and Steve Roach has done nothing more than he's been a great ally for us, and
Mhm.
he's promoted not only Lycia but my solo album.
Yeah.
And yet I, s- I honestly believe that if Lycia set up a show in Phoenix right now, there would be, besides the local goth community, there'd be very few people showing up and there would be no press coverage. Yet we could go and play a show in Europe someplace or in New York or Los Angeles and it would be a big deal. And it's, it's sad because I think Lycia's music is very much influenced by the Arizona environment.
Clearly.
And Burning Circle was, I mean, it's very much an Arizona album for me.
Yeah. Maybe though it's a good sign when people are dismissing what you're doing, maybe that actually means that you're doing something good. You're doing
Yeah.
what you want and you're not listening to anybody else and you're not
True.
taking in their, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're known
But
by
I
the
mean,
company you keep, I guess.
Mhm.
hey, Dave, I'm sort of curious, what is your reaction to that? Because as you well know, a lot of the people that dismissed us were people that were really our friends. And what is your impression? Because my impression was, um, you know, we're not doing things that are too terribly different than what you guys are doing. Why are we seen as being maybe not as
Not
good as what
cool.
you guys are doing, not cool enough? So I'm curious because you milled around with those people a lot more than I did. What was your impression about that? Because I've often wondered about that because I often thought, man, that's pretty. It might be a difficult thing to deal with.
I don't know. I think as I appreciate the music that they were doing, and I really enjoyed it. I found that I felt more comfortable working under your sound, under what Lycia was doing. I can see how we diverted off into a kind of a different path. A lot of what they were doing, it it went along the same lines as what was big at the time, very Manchester sound, and they were following that trend while we were sort of kind of doing our own thing. And I can see why maybe they, felt that, oh, we're, I don't know, maybe they felt that we were just kind of stuck in that sort of goth dark wave road compared to where they were at, and they were kind of following a newer trend that was happening at that time. And I can understand that, they weren't as much into what we were doing. But I mean, and that goes back to just, it's just, I think it's good to do what you enjoy doing. If you just do what you want to do and just record the music that you record, and if you find an audience that enjoys it, then that's good.
Yeah, I think I think you phrased that very well. But for me, I think one of the most glorious moments of my live career had to be the Night of Beautiful Noise.
Mm.
Because we literally went into a situation where we were the odd men out and we came in there and it was, we were doing our own thing and we made it well known. And I wish every show we ever played was at that level and that quality because um, that was the first live show for Lycia, and I thought, oh, this is pretty insane. And as you remember that night, I mean, it was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember, but when we finished that show, there was maybe about 5 seconds of complete quiet, and then the place just erupted.
Yeah, it was a massive. That sound was just ridiculous, and I think you even talked about before. It was so loud it knocked a large cable from the ceiling or from the rafters that nearly killed Mike Plaster.
Yeah, I remember that. And I also remember that the light guy came over to me and he was like, "What do you guys want?" And I know that all the other bands were saying, "Just put a blue light on me or put a red light on me." And I was like, "Make it look like a UFO is landing on stage." That's what I told him. And I said, "Keep that smoke machine going full blast." I go, "Use those lights. You have a top-notch lighting system here, and you use it." And that guy did.
Yeah.
It was literally like a UFO landed on stage.
It was amazing. Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
too bad that's not on video somewhere, like it wasn't recorded.
It was recorded on audio. It's the best
No, I
live.
know, but like if it was video recorded, that would have been cool.
It probably is someplace, but I mean, I don't even have any pictures of that.
There was a
Right.
very short, maybe a 2-minute clip of it that somebody had.
No
And
way.
Really?
yeah,
I never even seen it.
I think somebody, I think one of Jason's friends had
Oh man.
so
Okay, I'm gonna move to the next question. This is from Wolfgang. I just now found out Ryan Lum mastered this. I also have been seeing you guys pop up on a lot of shoegaze lists, which makes sense now, but didn't back when this came out. You're also also on a couple doomcore, gloomcore, and cold wave things I've seen. Again, makes sense, but back in the day, you were just kind of lumped into the goth category, at least at my record store. Sorry. Do you feel like you've influenced a lot of the newer generations of musicians? Are you getting a broader audience? Finally, does your offspring think what does your offspring think of your old albums given that you're popping up on things like cold wave lists? I can answer the thing about the offspring, he doesn't care.
Yeah, he doesn't care. I think he appreciates that we're music oriented because I
Yeah.
mean, Dirk is truly a musical. He's talented.
Mm-hmm.
He's already playing classical piano. He's a talented kid. I hope he sticks with it. Um, I absolutely love what happened to Lycia.
Mm-hmm.
We were sort of in the where have they gone heap in the 2000s, and then the crowds that resurrected us were uh, a lot of the metal scenes,
Yep.
a lot of the modern dark wave scenes, which are you can't really compare them to the old dark wave scenes.
Yeah.
They're much more expanded in regards to what their influences are. We were a band out of time. We were a band that
Mhm.
should have happened in 1982 or should have happened 10 years ago. We fell at the most inopportune time possible
mhm.
because we would have been a major label band in the early 80s. And if we would have come out 10 years later, we would be as probably doing as well as a lot of the newer bands are doing now. When we came about, the goth, I hate saying this, but what was called goth at that time had become so cartoonish.
Yeah.
It wasn't Bauhaus, it wasn't Killing Joke, it wasn't Wire, it wasn't Joy Division. It had become a cookie cutter. Every band sounded the same. It wasn't even Christian Death. Tara and I just
Right.
heard this thing yesterday that was absolutely awesome. Some band like was doing Devo covers in the style of Christian Death, and it was absolutely awesome because they were so authentic to what that first Christian Death album was, which was it was a good album.
Yeah.
By the time Lycia came around, for some strange reason, we were lumped in with two different scenes. We were lumped into a scene of a bunch of these Sisters of Mercy wannabe bands that weren't as good as Sisters of Mercy. They just sounded like imitators. And also a bunch of, I guess you could say, pre-dream pop bands, which I don't understand why, because my voice is so gruff. How does Lycia with my gruff voice fit in with the Sundays?
Mhm.
I don't
So
know.
we were
Right.
just at the wrong place at the wrong time. But it seemed like in like 2010 and later, suddenly there's these bands coming out that sound a lot like Lycia.
Mhm.
And suddenly we become pertinent. And what we were doing all those years before is like what they're doing now. And so I love, I mean, come on, we're an avant-garde music now. It's a doom and black metal label.
Mhm.
And it's absolutely great being on that label. I love being on that label.
Right.
We're the oddballs out. But think about this. The last new music that Lycia did was a synth pop song on a black metal label. How cool is that?
Yeah, I love it.
And everybody there was cool with it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now go back in time to the 90s. We were required to be a certain way because there was this perception of us by the people that by a certain aspect of the people that followed us that needed us to be a certain way. Dave, you remember this well. I'm sure of it. Remember on the Start Corner tour, we were in Berkeley and we were up in that weird balcony doing some kind of like signing.
That
And
was
it was in Berkeley.
Amoeba Records?
It might have been, yeah.
Yeah.
We were up there and we were signing autographs, and this girl came up, and there was this other band that was hanging out with us, and the guy was really goth looking. The girl went to this guy and was like, I absolutely love Ionia. I have this gift for you. And the guy was like, that's the guy in the band here. And she looked over at me, and I had my hair slicked back like Chris Isaac or whatever. And she just handed me the cards, didn't say anything, and walked away.
Right.
And there was her address on the card. So I emailed her and thanks for the cards. Never responded to me. She probably never listened to Lycia ever again because she thought, this guy doesn't have the goth look. He's not cool. Now, how is it that you go from like liking the music and then you meet me in person? Yeah, nothing like feeding into my own personal insecurities.
No kidding.
I mean, yeah, I'm just what I am. And so I'm not cool enough. I mean, it goes back to the whole Tempe thing and it goes back to everything else in my life. Just not cool enough.
You're like, tell me something I don't know.
But then, Tara and I go to see Drab Majesty play with, what was it, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago or whatever. And you're looking around the crowd and it's like, yeah, that guy's got a mustache and that person's got a beard and that person, everybody is just who they are. Everyone is just individual, and yet everybody's liking it. And I'm like, why couldn't it have been that way back then?
You're going to run into people like that who are more focused on making the scene, focused on looking the part. They care more about sort of aesthetics rather than things that are deeper.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think at that time, and we remember that well from the Burning Circle tour, being placed into situations where we're like, this isn't what we're about.
Right.
We just want to play our music. And it's like, okay, no, this is about a lifestyle and this is about an aesthetic that we just didn't fit into. And it was frustrating. We try to be accommodating, but we only can be what we are. And it's satisfying for me now, all these years later, that people are finally accepting us for what we are.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to read the next one. This one's from Matthew, and it's kind of long, so bear with me. And my eyesight. After the post-apocalyptic sound of A Day in the Start Corner and the industrial experimentation of Bleak, what led to a more acoustic and polished sound found on Burning Circle? Is this a deliberate choice? I always considered Burning Circle to be a concept album or something close to it. There is a narrative thread that weaves from one piece to another, a kind of somewhat abstract inner transformation. Was that the original intention? Is it possible to tell us the little story behind the lyrics in general? They are powerful, just like the music. I find that the lyrics have several layers of meaning and are very well crafted. Tara, what were your first impressions when you joined the band for the Burning Circle recordings? As a band with a new member, were you on some sort of creative high? How was the album received by fans and critics upon its initial release? Do you think the album got all the exposure it deserved? I consider this album to be an important work of art that transcends genres and labels. For me, it is an immense masterpiece that is timeless and absolutely perfect. It's a classic, just like Unknown Pleasures, Disintegration, or Souvlaki. After all these years, what are your opinions now on The Burning Circle? I'm just going to answer my part real quick. I was like very much not wanting to screw up Lycia because I was a huge Lycia fan and I knew coming into it that just like not to compare myself to Jarboe, but she had a backlash when she joined Swans and I knew that and people don't like their precious thing disrupted. And so I knew that going into it, but I've maintained the same position that I've had since day one of I know that it's a gift anytime I get to sing on a Lycia song, and I never take it for granted. So if you come to me with one song or 15 songs or no songs, it's a gift either way, and I just accept it for what it is. I know that there was some backlash to me joining because I can specifically remember one review that said I was the worst thing that ever happened to the band and that Mike is happy now and it sucks. So that which I find hilarious now, but at the time I was like, you know, that sucks, but it's still kind of funny. So that's my 2 cents. And yes, I was on a creative high because I'm like, holy crap, I get to sing on this record and I get to meet Mike Van Portfleet and I get to go on tour and it's crazy and I love it and I never want this to end. Okay, now y'all can talk.
Well, in terms of the direction, and no, there was never any kind of list. I never said I'm going to switch the direction. I just go with whatever's happening at the time. I got a short attention span, so I'm always changing styles. In terms of the reaction, the initial reaction to the Burning Circle was negative. I think the first couple weeks I got a lot of really nasty letters sent to me saying that I sold out, saying that I was wrecking Lycia. But by the same token, I remember being at we all three of us were staying at your parents' house when we first moved to Ohio during the break-in touring.
Mm-hmm.
And your mom comes in, your mom, just the old country gal. You got a phone call, and I pick up the phone, and it's a nationally known music writer. And she's calling me to talk about the Burning Circle, but she's not calling me to interview me about it. She's calling me to just tell me how much she likes the album. Nothing like that's ever happened before or since.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I talked to her for probably an hour. And she just talked to me how much she loved the Burning Circle and she thought it was an important album. And at the time I thought, okay, this is what it's about, doing your own thing, is that, you know, there was criticism, and it was criticism from people I knew. That was harsh. And Tara, you remember seeing those letters.
I do.
It was harsh. Now, prior to the Burning Circle, Lycia, it felt to me like could do no wrong. And it to a certain degree made Lycia a flawed band, because when you think that no matter what you do is going to be praised, I allowed myself to release a lot of comp songs that I never should have done. But because I would release a comp song that sounded bad, in retrospect, bad, but people would say it was amazing, it messes with your head.
Mm-hmm.
And you start thinking, okay, well, I guess I don't like this, but they like it. What, it made a lot of bad decisions on my part. So it was a weird time because it signaled to me that we were moving into the next level. You know, how many people, as bands get bigger, you get more people that are fanatical about you, but you get more people that get negative about
Mhm.
you. And the Burning Circle was the first time that I saw legitimate negativity, with the exception of when Across This Gray Land #2 came out. The very first review came out and it totally ripped me for my deathbed vocals. But after that, every single review from that point up to the initial fanzine reviews of Burning Circle were glowing. But when Burning Circle came out, when that came out, there was some really bad reviews initially. But once I think people absorbed the album, then the reviews got way better and it took us to the next level. I think there was a big jump from where we were at Stark Corner from after Burning Circle. It definitely felt to me like we had stepped
Mhm.
up a considerable amount.
Yeah. Got anything, Dave?
No, no, I think that was mostly, you know, I don't know. That was all Mike.
Yeah.
You know.
Agreed. So this next question we already sort of answered, but in case you have anything you want to add, this is from Nicholas. I would love to know what your inspirations were. Who were you listening to a lot at the time you made the album? So Dave and I already answered this, but Mike, I don't think you did. So maybe you can add some 2 cents.
Yeah, I guess I'll go back to Stark Corner, which was a weird time for me. When I made Stark Corner, I was listening to a lot of classical music,
Mm-hmm.
which, I mean, I was sort of a hack musician back then. So, but I think classical music plus hack musician equals uh,
Stupid.
well, it's sort of what it was. But I think I mean, I was pretty influenced by the resurgence of guitar-based music. I mean, obviously electronics are very important to Lycia, but um, a lot of the shoegaze stuff was really influencing me. I was really
Mm-hmm.
influenced by that. And even though there was a certain "we're greater than thou" aspect to that, I still liked it.
Yeah, of
And
course.
and it, I just loved the tidal waves of sound that was in bands like My Bloody Valentine and Slowdive. I just loved it. And I had the same influences as those bands. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in 1981, I was putting ads out wanting to be in a band like Killing Joke or Susie and the Banshees. I mean, that's what I wanted. Joy Division. That's what I wanted. I mean, when I first formed my first band, I wanted it to be Echo and the Bunnymen. That's what I wanted. And because I was maybe not as a good a musician as some of those bands, I sort of come up with my own style. But that's all I ever wanted. And then when suddenly Lycia is like thrust into this dark wave scene of the early 90s, I remember when on the very first show, the first real show of the Stark Corner Tour, we played in Berkeley at House of Usher. I was perplexed. I was looking out at this crowd of this just massive amount of goth people out there, and the lights and the way they were dressed and the way they were dancing. I had never seen anything like that in my life before. And I'm like, why are these people here to see what we're doing? It didn't make any sense to me. And it was exciting and it was cool, but man, I felt I felt really out of place. And when I heard shoegaze, I thought that's more my line. And so the Burning Circle was maybe moving back in being guitar oriented. It was all about being back based around what my initial instrument was, which was the guitar. And so that's the angle I came from. It had to be about the guitar and back to my roots.
Okay, so I just got a battery warning because I wasn't planning on using this, so it's not plugged in. So I'm going to ask our next two questions, and then we'll try to wrap it up and try to stay to our time limit that we said we were going to stay to anyways.
All right.
So apologize if I go dead in advance.
All right.
Nice.
Okay. James Edward asks, do you feel as though this record is your magnum opus? And if not, which record would you give that title to?
I'll go last. I'm really curious to hear what both of you think.
I can't, my brain doesn't think on that way. So I'm not even going to answer this question because my brain doesn't operate that way. So I'm not answering that.
Okay. To me though, I think it was my first Lycia album that I worked with Mike with. So it was it's a very special album.
Of course.
Itself.
Yeah.
And even to this day, it remains my largest influence for all of my solo albums. You know, that's it's sort of the template that I've used since then. You know, I'll do acoustic, EBow, guitars, layer it all just like we did when we recorded Burning Circle. And I feel like all of my albums have reflected or reflect the Burning Circle in some way or another. I would be more than happy at deleting all the vocals and having Mike and Tara singing over those because I hate singing. And
That's a shame because I think you have a great voice.
I agree.
I think your albums are marvelous, and don't undersell yourself because they are very top notch. And both Tara and I are big fans.
Also, I would not hesitate to sing for you, just FYI.
Nice.
Now,
But not at the expense of your own vocals.
now I don't know how people are going to react to this, but to me, Lycia's peak is in Flickers. To
I knew
me,
you were going to say that.
I think that if I approach, and Flickers is the first album that I 100% approach saying, I don't give a flying fuck. But anybody thinks I'm going to, for the first time in my life, go from my very bizarre angle and do exactly the way I want to do it. And I came from very strange angles on it. But when it was done, I thought, I wish I approached every single Lycia album from this angle.
I love it.
Yes.
Okay, here's our last question. Battery's still going. Evan asks, okay, so I had to find this post again after searching for a band I had no idea was a band because I didn't want to ask about a band if that wasn't what you were speaking about. But after searching for first the Lycians, but eventually finding Lycia, I figured out and listened to a few songs. I knew I was going to ask if you were in the band also, so I had to look that up, and you are. Again, didn't want to sound stupid, but before that, I was going to suggest that the lead singer sing a little louder because I had trouble hearing the lyrics and found out it was you. Talk about sounding stupid, LOL. But I love the music. You have a great voice too. The music covers it up too much though, and I am sure I am missing very meaningful lyrics. So that's the question we're going out on, and I think it's hilarious.
Nice.
Okay,
Nice.
are you the sound guy that are you all the sound guys that I dealt with in your music career? Because every sound guy told me to sing louder, told me to get closer to the mic, told me that he can put reverb on my vocals, and he couldn't hear what I was saying. And I was like, okay, wait a minute, have you heard Slow Dive?
I think maybe he's not. I don't think that our style of music is his go-to style of music. So I think maybe.
And I don't want to be negative towards this person because
he didn't even know who Lycia was.
I am totally 100% welcoming of come one, come all.
Yep, 100%. So I guess we can wrap this up. I feel like we could have talked for like 3 hours just on the tour. the Burning Circle tour. Like we
Which
didn't
is
even
funny because we
scratch,
didn't even talk about it.
we really didn't. We didn't even scratch the surface of it. So maybe at some point down the line we can get together and talk about that because that in and of itself is super important to that era. But our record's coming out soon. I think December it's supposed to come out.
Sometime in December, and Avantgarde did a hell of a job with the
It's
design.
beautiful.
I'm excited.
And I love you guys.
I love
My
you too.
cohorts in crime or whatever you want to call it.
Well,
Dave, thanks for go
maybe
ahead.
maybe someday. I mean, dreaming's for free, but maybe the three of us can get together someday and do some kind of acoustic performance or something.
Yeah.
I
That would be
mean,
amazing.
it might just be at our house here or someplace, but I
Down
don't
at the
think
pool house in the neighborhood.
I don't think any of us are, ready to go and do a regular show, but it would be fun because, with Burning Circle coming out and me playing a lot of the acoustic guitar lately, that's a perfect album for that. I mean,
Yeah.
who knows?
Dreaming's free.
Dreaming's free.
I'd be down. That'd be cool.
All right. You said it. Careful what you say.
I know,
It's
right?
on recorded. It's recorded.
Yep.
All right, guys.
Okay. All right.
Go back to the Northwoods. Go drink some blood, Mike. And I'll talk to you
What?
from your castle in Transylvania.
Oh no, I'm in the northeast wing of the stately Lycia Manor in Superstition, Arizona, which is also known as our small little house.
I could literally throw a ball at you if I could get it around the corner from here, but
Nice. Do it.
maybe we'll see Phoenix lights later. Who knows?
Well, one thing you get to see is all the cool pictures on the wall that are in a lot of the Lycia videos.
Very
Yeah.
true. All right, my dog over here wants to go for a walk, so he's hounding me, literally. All right, well, I'll talk to y'all later.
All right.
Now if
Good
I
night,
can
guys.
figure out how to turn
Bye.
this off.
Take care.
Bye.